Welcome to Weather to Watch. It's a Tuesday afternoon, and we've got a lot of warm air across the central plains. The east is warming up gradually, too, after being very cold to start out this week, over the weekend especially. And there are some signs of change out west. Pretty interesting shift in the jet stream flow that will result in a couple of changes to the sensible weather across the U.S., and we'll talk about all that coming up. Hello, I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. We will start, as I usually do, with the lower 48 and using the visible satellite loop from earlier today. And always interesting because it shows the amazing cloud features. It shows snow on the ground still, like this area here in Ohio and Indiana. It shows high clouds. Those are the wispy things you see. It also shows circulations. Like you can see, this is clearly something that's rotating counterclockwise there off the coast of California. And it looks like a little weak weather system kind of trying to develop in this area here, and offshore flow producing cloud streamers as that cold air continues to flow out over the Atlantic, pick up moisture, pick up heat from the Gulf Stream, and eventually form those clouds. But what's the broader picture from the 500 millibar perspective? Basically, it's a zonal flow, kind of a temporary zonal flow, meaning weather's basically flowing from west to east. That explains why things are moderating quite a bit in this area here. We do have a sharp but very small trough of low pressure moving through Wisconsin. That's going to continue this way and produce some snow in New England and parts of the Northeast. Show you that in a minute. And then there's this big system off the coast of Los Angeles as well. As far as what the weather map looks like, according to the model at least, and this is the European model. It does show a weak front kind of draping from the eastern lakes down through Missouri, northern Arkansas, back into the southwestern U.S. This is colder air here, true. This is actually pretty mild air, so this front's not particularly strong. It's going to knock down temperatures a little bit, but they're going to not really totally recover back to where they were, but it's going to be pretty mild through the central U.S., and I'll show you the temperature trends in a minute. Now, there are areas where it still will snow, in particular out in this area here and in the Sierra Nevada. Let's take a look at that. So there is a snow forecast, which includes a little bit of a mixture of actual snow occurring with a weather system and a little bit of lake effect snow, not a whole lot. But you can see here the scale of the first time it turns to yellow, that's 6 inches of snow. So much of interior and even coastal Maine has a pretty good snow ahead of it, even 8-inch total showing up at that next color there. And same can be said for upstate New York. And lo and behold, the heavier snow areas are under a winter storm warning there along the eastern coast of Maine, northeastern coast of Maine. Everyone else is under a winter weather advisory for the most part. And then we turn our attention out west. The usual smattering of mountain snows in the central Rockies here. And also, this is really ramping up here. Snow expected along the Sierra Nevada and California. And as you might expect, there's little pockets of winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings. The winter storm warnings are what I'm circling right here. It just really is a matter of, the elevation of the mountain, also the intensity of the particular weather system that's moving through. Winter weather advisories are generally, not as intense, lesser snow. And winter storm warnings are to be taken a little more serious. Now, I want to show you one thing here. This is jumping out way ahead. This is the snow hazards map. Note the dates on this. This is the 18th through the 24th. So this is well into next week. Oops, sorry about that. And going through much of next week. And I wanted to show you that the snow is actually doing a couple of things. First of all, there's a high risk of heavy snow through the Sierra Nevada through that period. So the snow they're getting now over the next 3 days is not going to change much as we go into next week. Also, other areas of moderate risk of heavy snow stretching through parts of Utah. But by far, the slight risk areas are these darker purples, like here, and then moving out later in the period out into the northern plains, are indicative of a pattern change. And whenever you start seeing snow increasing across the northern plains, it's either coming from clipper systems, which that's not what this is, or a jet stream that's sinking south and allowing disturbances to pass this way. And let's talk more about that. And as you might have guessed, is there a severe weather potential down in this area on the other side of this pattern change? The answer to that would be yes. So yesterday, twice a week, on Mondays and on Thursdays, they do an EPS, which is really a weekly They're called the weeklies, and they really take the 500 millibar flow, which is what I'm showing you here, average it over a 7-day period, started yesterday, goes through Sunday, and it kind of gives you kind of a broad overview or oversight of what is going on. So when you see a ridge of high pressure here, and you see these warmer colors, which means that these heights, these are the lines here, are not only bending northward, but are actually high for this particular latitude, if you will. So basically this just means warming, where the cooling of the last several weeks almost is finally moving out into the Atlantic. But interestingly, we do have a little bit of general troughing developing over the western U.S. So as you might expect, the warming is really quite pronounced, especially in southern Canada here. These are just temperature anomalies over that 7-day period. So you're not really seeing a lot of cool air out west yet, but you are seeing a tremendously above normal pattern on average for about the next week over southern Canada, the Dakotas, Minnesota. Great relief for them after they were just in the icebox for so many of the days in January. And even down into Texas, above normal temperatures are expected. Now, this is the weeklies that run basically from yesterday through this Sunday. But I can just click a button and show you the weeklies that start a week this next Monday and go for a week. And you'll notice some pretty significant changes. This is actually pretty significant that we're starting to see troughing, and the darker purples indicate that this is starting to really be kind of an anomalous situation here over the west. So this is basically the interpretation of this is there's a jet stream developing through here, and I'll show you some static images here in a minute that kind of bolster that. As far as temperatures are concerned, yes, still pretty above normal through the eastern 2/3 of the U.S., but now starting to see some cooler trends out west as that pattern develops. And one more thing I wanted to show you, and this is pretty important for the snow and severe storm development, is that the dew point anomalies are up in the Central Plains, but in particular, basically running along the Mississippi River Valley and getting into the Great Lakes states a little bit. So what that means is that dew points are running a little bit on the high side compared to what's normal for this time of year. So that can feed severe weather, and it can also feed snow. So I want to take a look at both of those, but in particular, let's talk about severe weather possibilities. So this is the GEFS mean 500 millibar flow. This is for the 17th. So this is Tuesday of next week. So we're way out there. It's actually beyond any speculation that the Storm Prediction Center would put out, just barely, though. They would talk about day 8. And anything less than that. So next time I make this video, we might have some more speculation about what's going on. But generally, when I see this kind of flow without any other information at all, I would assume that this is going to mean in the wintertime heavier snows back here, and in the summertime at least the potential for heavier rains and or severe storms there. And by the way, I did check the European model on this, and they're very close as of the 12Z run this morning. So in other words, this flow looks a lot like it looks on the Euro, basically. So that's the 17th. 18th, this flattens out a little bit, and while this is an interesting strong jet streak feature that could lead to snows here and some rain and severe weather here, like a lot of times, the initial wave, so that red right there is the leading strong wind wave, I guess you could call it, that's coming in. And so a lot of times what needs to happen, for severe weather at least, is you need to open up the Gulf. And there's a big old ridge of high pressure over the Gulf. And this is a pretty linear flow here. So in other words, I'm looking for moisture trying to return through this area. And this little initial wave could be just what it takes to stall out a front through this area and allow moisture to gradually come back. So that's the 18th. And then so here's what's going on. Look at this trough over California. So that is, I think, what might initiate something on the severe weather side of things. And if we move ahead one more day to the 19th, that appears to be true. We have some sort of a trough of low pressure, still a broad, long wave over the western U.S., and probably the return of significant enough moisture by, that would be Thursday of next week, to do something. Again, this is all highly speculative and more than a week out, which may not weigh a whole lot. And the only reason I even mention it is because the two long-range models happen to agree. So I figured I had a little bit of license to talk about that a little bit. But the general trend is true. And as I showed you, the snow and chances increase up here. We just don't have any official word from other forecasters about what's happening on the severe weather end of this, but that will be, I believe, forthcoming. So we'll come back to this week now and talk about how warm it's going to be. Again, the interpretation of this is the colors. You can read over here. These are departures from normal. So the warmer colors are warmer than normal, and the colder colors are colder than normal. So much of the country is still dominated by a lot of warm air. Only California and parts of the Great Lakes and Ohio River Valley are going to be a little bit below normal. But this is getting corrected slowly as the week progresses. Very much above normal temperatures in the Dakotas and in Texas. Still kind of cool in the Northeast, but even that's beginning to wear off. And in fact, if we go through Sunday, only pockets of the Northeast are experiencing below normal temperatures. This area here coincides with that weekly because this blob basically has not moved, even though I go every other day. So that's basically 6 days worth of data, and this above normal area really stays there. And this is the opening graph I showed you. So this is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, and that's starting this coming a week from yesterday and going through all of next week. Very warm temperatures here. And again, the question is, just because it's warm and you have a changing jet stream doesn't necessarily create severe weather. You do have to have a return of Gulf moisture. You do have to have some dry air, a loft forming into this. You have to have a proper trough configuration, proper short waves moving through that. Again, that's all something that'll come out. But as you can see here, we do have cooler temperatures trending next week over California, a sign that that pattern in the jet stream level is beginning to develop. So on the heavy rain side of things, I did want to show you that beginning on Saturday, this is a heavy rain hazard zone here. All of Arkansas, slivers of the states around that, but basically the idea is that goes from Arkansas and spreads east into Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama Saturday into Sunday. And then there's a kind of the secondary pocket of heavy rain potential on Sunday there in southern Georgia and the panhandle of Florida. The weather prediction center has this as a forecast for rain here. So when it turns to the purple color, that's 1.5 inches right here. And when it turns to that darker red color, that's 2 inches. Again, we have had rains that have certainly amounted to much, much more. But this is something worthy of watching. Now, this is not generally falling in a heavy snow area. A lot of that snow has disappeared. Remember I showed you the satellite image? It's really just existing up here now. So that thread of this combining with snow melt is gone, basically. We're not talking about that anymore. And if we're talking about the long range, one last thing I'll show you here is that on the rain hazards, again, through the 18th through the 24th, so beginning the middle of next week and going through the following weekend, as you might expect, heavier precipitation coming ashore with that troughiness. We showed you snow, but there's also heavy rain potential, especially through from San Diego through L.A. and up to San Francisco, a moderate risk of heavier rain through that particular forecast period. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.